Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and it's time for part 2 of the Q&A, so let's go ahead and get this started. Alright, first question. If I currently squat 350 for a 1 rep max, we'll assume these are in pounds, deadlift 405, but my bench is trash like 160 for 5, am I still intermediate despite my bench being garbage? And if I lean bulk, is it reasonable for me to reach a 405 squat, 450 deadlift, and a 225 to 250 bench within a year? You're just one of these people who's not built to bench. Now, without seeing your technique, your form, everything else, I don't know what to tell you is going on with your bench. Right? I can't see where your muscle weaknesses are. I can't see if maybe you just don't know how to bench. So it might be one of those things where I would say you probably need a coach, right? You probably need a coach. And if I'm outside of your budget, maybe find someone who's good who costs less. There are plenty out there. So you probably need a coach. Now, that being said, assuming that your bench technique is proficient, for you to reach those within a year, all of those, look, to go from a 350 squat to a 405, and, again, 45 pounds on your deadlift, those are very, very likely doable inside of a year, depending on your leverages. Now, as far as the bench goes, if you're not having a lot of luck with bench, if you've been bulking already, then and your bench technique is on point, I don't think you're going to hit a 250 bench a year from now. Now, if you haven't been bulking and your bench needs to be cleaned up, there's some major technical issues. You might be bending your wrist. You might not have the correct bar position. You might be loose, right? You might be so loose that I could walk over and move your leg in the middle of a set. If I could nudge your leg and move it, you don't know how to bench. You're not setting up correctly. So if those things are all fixable, then it might be doable. So that's really what it's going to come down to. It's going to depend on what's wrong with your bench. Is it lack of eating? Is it technical in nature? You just haven't been performing the lift correctly. And if you haven't been performing the lift correctly and you manage to get up to 250, you're probably going to start getting injured at that point. It's a very good possibility you're going to start getting hurt. So again, you need to address all these things, right? Film yourself benching. There are plenty of even groups online, strength training groups, where if you even just film your benching and upload it, people will say something. You could even probably do it on my Facebook page. You could probably do it under a thread, and then me and other people, like any one of the memes where everyone's interacting, you could just upload a quick clip. It'll take 30 seconds for you to do that. And people can assess your bench, right? You have options there. All right, next question. Hey coach, might sound silly, but what would you do with a lifter who feels speed work is rather easy and not getting a lot out of it, especially on bench? I don't have access to bands or chains, and I know that can make a difference. Thanks. Yeah, accommodating resistance makes all the difference. When I take a lifter who's only had straight weight and they get into a powerlifting gym or a home gym setup and they add bands or chains, that is the first thing they notice. Like, wow, the speed work is completely different now. So that is a good point, and I'm glad you're aware that that will matter a lot. I'm going to say that if your speed work feels easy, though here's the problem. All right, people who have problems with speed work is because it's too hard. People don't have problems with speed work because it's too easy. If it's too easy, you're not doing speed work. You are not getting tight enough and exploding hard enough on the lifts. Like if you're not feeling anything and it feels easy, I promise you you're not doing speed work. You're probably doing straight sets at 60% for doubles and triples and singles. Almost guarantee you that's the case. Because it's probably not moving fast because you are not exploding hard enough. You should be exploding as hard as you possibly can on speed work. It should be violent. And if you don't have bands or chains to slow you down at the lockout, you should basically almost be lifting off the bench. On a speed bench, for example. Is your body almost breaking contact with the bench? Is your upper back coming off the bench? Is your traps coming off the bench when you lock it out? Like you're having to forcibly keep them down. If no, then you're probably just doing straight sets on bench and thinking it's speed work. Right? And reality is it might be as slow as old people fuck. So you might want to look very closely at your bar speeds and if you really are pushing as aggressively as you think you are. Because you should almost be cramping up. Speed squats, if you're doing them with the correct timing and the right tempo, you should be running out of breath. You should be feeling like you're going to vomit. you should probably almost need to lay down and sit down at the end of the set. Like when you're done with like your 12 doubles, you should almost need to just lay down or sit down for 5 minutes. Okay, if you're not, then you're really not exerting yourself. You're possibly just doing straight sets. The people who have problems with speed work are the ones who push everything that they have and the bar still is really slow. Okay, that's the difference. All right, next question and last question of the week. Do you still believe the overhead press can build a strong bench press? Alpha Destiny recently mentioned this in one of his videos. Just wanted to hear your thoughts. Because something can do it doesn't mean that it's the most efficient, effective, or the fastest way to do it. And in other words, it's almost like asking, hey, if I put all my focus on overhead press, will my bench go up? Well, very possibly. But it would be a lot easier to work on your bench and bench accessories more than to exclusively do the overhead press trying to build your bench. Now, when we say that a strong person will have a good bench, what we mean is, hey, if you build your strict standing press up to 275, you'll probably have a respectable bench with minimal benching. But here's the way to look at that. Carryover of the overhead press to the bench can in some cases be dependent upon the grip you're using. In other words, someone who uses a narrower grip is probably going to get better carryover. Someone who uses a wider grip may not. Why? Because it becomes an issue of how much pec versus how much front delt you're using. Okay? And the other way to look at it is, what's one of the best accessories for the overhead press? People who are very, very serious about their strict press, what's one of the #1 accessories for it? The closed grip bench. The closed grip bench will carry over to your overhead press. Incline bench carries over to your overhead press. So the funny thing is, the movements that will help facilitate the best improvement in your overhead press are also good accessories for your flat bench as well. So again, the question is way more nuanced. The question becomes, how do you build a strong overhead press? Because there aren't many guys out there hitting really big overhead presses purely from overhead work. They're doing supplemental lifts for it. Well, you start to say, well, there's a supplemental lifts improving my bench also. Well, of course they are. And ultimately, here's what it comes down to. Like with anything else, you need to look at where your weak links are. If you're looking at your bench and your weakest link is not the deltoids, building your overhead press may not see any immediate carryover at all to your bench. It might not do anything. Again, particularly depending upon how wide you grip the bar. If you're in a situation to where your front delts are the limiting factor in your bench press instead of the pecs or the triceps, then yeah, overhead press will have very, very solid carryover. So the question is actually more nuanced than that, because here's what it comes down to. I would never recommend that a person only do one lift to get good at that lift. So if you even want to get good at the overhead press, you're going to have to find your weak links in the overhead press and train them. Right? You're going to need supplemental work for that. So you need to be looking at these things as relationships between each other in these lifts, not will this lift build this other lift? Well, maybe, maybe not. What is the relationship of those exercises relative to your leverages and weak points? And this stuff should always be in a flow, and this stuff is dynamic and it changes over time. All right, that's how we need to approach training instead of just a flat, hey, if I build my overhead press, will my bench go up? In some cases it won't. In some cases it might. You need to understand why you are picking the lift that you are picking. If you want to get really strong, this is the way that you have to approach it. All right, guys, well, that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.